What I wanted to speak about is the fact that in this conflict and in its development right now, there's going to be a crucial decision that Iran is going to have to make, and a crucial component that might determine the course of the war, which is how the Iranians are able to handle the Kurds. Because the Kurds currently are roughly in this region, okay? More or less. I will choose a larger thing. Roughly in this region, okay? You have Erbil here. This is the main Kurdish city. You have them in the mountains in part of Turkey, in western Iran, and of course in Erbil, which is in Iraq, in this region, northeastern Iraq and northern Iraq. And I believe also parts of Syria, a small part of Syria, and this area of Turkey. And so the thing you have to understand about the Kurds is that for decades, perhaps longer, this is a stateless people, okay? And they've always been aligning with the U.S. and Israel. Now, why are they aligned with the U.S. and Israel? Well, the U.S. and Israel has seen the Kurds as useful because, for instance, when the U.S. and Israel supported proxy forces and revolutionary forces in Syria to fight Bashar al-Assad, the Kurds played a major component. Okay, they were a major fighting force which was competent. They were also fighting against ISIS. They do this because if they participate in this civil war and they are able to establish a position within the Syrian government or influence over the new Syrian government, then they may be on the path to statehood, right? Because again, they do not have a state and they believe that they're owed a state and they want a state. This is the same case in Turkey, right? The Turkish government treats a lot of the Kurdish organizations as terroristic organizations. We won't get into, who is right here, but essentially Turkey sees them as a threat to Turkish sovereignty, right? Particularly in the lands in which they occupy. They are separatists. They are considered kind of separatists, right? And this is also true in northern Iraq and western Iran. And so about a month ago, when the protests broke out in Iran, the area that was particularly affected was the Kurdish area. I do not recall precisely which cities, but you can go back and look at the videos. But the most the overwhelming force of protesters were generally in Kurdish cities. And this is because they do not see themselves as part of Iran, okay? They see themselves as Kurdish. Now, there are rumors going around that the Kurds have been armed consistently by the CIA, by the Mossad, essentially by the Americans and the Israelis, right? Now, why would they do that? Well, if Israel and the Americans anticipated this conflict, which is now relegated to mostly missile exchanges, they must have known, or at least planned for, had a contingency plan that if they take out the Ayatollah and the top leaders, that the government might disintegrate, or there might be an internal coup by more moderate forces, or perhaps there will be a nationwide uprising, right? We haven't seen that uprising. At least not from the Iranians, and not in the capacity that perhaps we would have expected if the government was in such a crisis as it is now. Now, I think to a large degree, the reason that isn't happening is because the Iranian government is taking measures to ensure it won't happen by giving the order for police and military to kill on sight any kind of anti-regime protests. Now, I know that, this might be very ugly, but I mean, you can kind of think from Iran's perspective, if you have protesters coming out at a time like this, when the regime leaders, the Ayatollah, has just been killed, and there is an obvious overt attack by the American military, the most powerful military in the world by far, and the Israelis, then, a protest, a riot, that is not going to help. That is actually a national security threat. they will be treated as terrorists. They will be treated as collaborators with this, with the foreign enemies of Iran. And so now there has been rumors, like I was saying, that the Kurds are being armed, and now that they're planning some kind of offensive into Iran. Now, Iran cannot, from their perspective, if I'm them, there's no way I'm allowing this. Okay, so you have in Iraq, aligned with Iran and the regime forces, the Kurdish militias, right? Let's say the Kurdish militia is roughly centered around Baghdad and other areas, perhaps. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I don't want to get in too much into the details. You also have Lebanon, the southern Lebanon, and Hezbollah. Okay, now Hezbollah, longtime ally. And back when Bashar al-Assad was in power, there was a land corridor all the way from Iran through Shia-controlled Iraq, through Syria, at the behest of the Assad forces, and into Lebanon. And so there was a constant supply and logistics route going into Lebanon so that Hezbollah could arm, and then Hezbollah can threaten Israel from the north, okay? We won't get into the Yemenis. They're not on this map, and I just don't want to focus on this video, okay? And particularly, I mean the Houthi. So this route, right, that cuts somewhere through, Iraq, I don't know which particular roads, was operating in full force until, of course, the fall of Assad, and now we have Julani, and it is no secret that the sort of Al-Qaeda-affiliated Sunni groups do not like the Shia Muslims, and they have been long enemies, particularly the more radical sects of that's come out of Al-Qaeda, like ISIS. Even Osama bin Laden was telling ISIS to chill, basically, because they wouldn't stop attacking Shia mosques and killing other Muslims. And Osama bin Laden thought that, Muslims kind of had to universally be united so that they could oppose the American presence and Zionism and this kind of thing. But anyways, that's beside the point. So Iran needs to secure this logistic hub, right? Because, there are other rumors that Iran wants ground forces to be operating to attack U.S. bases, but also to attack Israel. Now, this would probably be mostly Shia and Hezbollah forces being supplied and funded by Iran, okay? Now, Iran might send an expeditionary force too, as well. They have done this in the past in Iraq and in Syria to fight against ISIS and other elements. Even the Americans, Soleimani was killed because he had a large role in, the kind of IED revolution against American Humvees and so on. Now, again, the Kurds are mostly, controlling some area like this, all right, more or less. Again, it's just an estimate. If you're Iran, you have to deal with this Kurdish threat immediately, right? With your Shia militias and with your own forces, you have to secure this area so that the corridor towards Lebanon stays open. Now, to what extent the corridor in Syria is open, I am not exactly sure. I'm not sure if anybody knows other than the Syrians. I'm sure the intelligence agency knows, but if you could tell me and explain, is Iran still able to supply Hezbollah through Syria to some degree? Do they have some kind of agreement with the Syrian government, with Julani? I don't know. But, again, they are not friendly to the Shia, so I don't really know how that would work. But nevertheless, what they do have control over, at least in the immediate term, is how they handle the Kurdish forces in the north and in northwest Iran and the north of Iraq. Now, we see increasingly that Turkey is coming into the crosshairs of Israel, and there are talks of this now that they are kind of the next Iran. Will there be Iranian and Turkish cooperation to, keep the Kurds at bay? I don't know. Okay, because when it comes down to it, Turkey might not love Iran, but they also want a balance of power. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. But I just wanted to explain this because now these rumors are coming out that, the Kurdish forces have been armed by intelligence agencies in the U.S. and Israel for a long time, and now they're going to be launching offensives. And if Iran loses control of, this area, if their logistics pathways get squeezed or even entirely cut, it's just going to be an utter disaster. So we should be expecting developments in this direction very soon. A showdown between the Iranians and the Kurds and the Shia militias in Iraq. Thanks for watching.